Now everyone knows ragu alla bolognese. It's most people's favorite pasta. What you might not know about is the ragu that came before that, before tomatoes made their way to Italy. We're talking about ragu Bianco, sometimes known as white bolognese, but bolognese is a specific thing, so ragu Bianco is more appropriate. I made this for the first time recently and I thought it would be good, but really eating it felt like this real, true, authentic, rustic taste of Italy. There's something about the simplicity of a recipe like this. Hard to explain unless you try it yourself. So I'm starting off with my mirepoix here. I've got onions, carrot, and celery. I've also got some pancetta here, and all of this stuff is gonna go into a food processor and get blitzed up. First, we just wanna break it down a little bit. I'm gonna peel the carrots. You're gonna get a good little speed peeler. I'm gonna hold the carrot, push the peeler away from you while you spin the carrot to quickly bang through peeling a bunch of carrots. Roughly chop the onion, chop up the carrots, and the celery, same way. You might ask why chop things up if you're gonna throw them in the food processor. It just gives it a little bit of an easier time getting them chopped up evenly. Got me a new food processor. This guy has no frills, probably had it in your house forever. I found it to be the best one. Halfway through, push some of that stuff along the walls into it. Make sure it all gets nicely processed. Kind of mimic the texture of the ground beef and pork we're gonna be using. It's kind of like pasty. That's beautiful. Gonna add some nice body to something that doesn't have tomato in it to add that body. So there's a lot of moisture in there. We're gonna need to cook that off, and what's remaining is gonna be all that mirepoix flavor. It's gonna be the base of the flavor of this. Back to this, we're gonna take our pancetta, do the same thing. Now we've got our pancetta, we've got pureed mirepoix. We're gonna need some wine, some white wine for this. Gonna be using a little beef broth, some milk, a little rosemary, a little bit of thyme, not too much, you don't wanna overpower it, just a little bit, and then a bay leaf or two. We're gonna fry it up in some butter and some olive oil. And here I've got both ground chuck and ground pork, about a 50-50 blend, 1 pound. Let's get this ragu started. So to get this started, we need a large Dutch oven. We're gonna get that on medium-high heat, and we wanna add enough olive oil to coat the bottom of the pan. I'm gonna take a little bit of that meat and test the oil, and once it's sizzling, I'm gonna go ahead and add in all of that beef and pork and just sort of smash it down into a flat layer in the pan. Try and get some good color development on that first side. I'm gonna season that with some salt, and while that starts browning, I'm gonna go ahead and add in the minced pancetta. I'm just gonna spread that out, try and make contact to the oil. We're just gonna let that go. Leave it alone, let color develop on that side. After a few minutes, you can peek, and if you got some color working, you can give it all a shake and a stir and begin to sort of mince this down into an even finer mince of meat, little bite-sized pieces. And to show you how long this process takes, I'm gonna set a timer for 30 minutes. I'm gonna really take my time, allowing that moisture of the meat to bleed out. It's gonna first start to steam, and once all that moisture is evaporated, it's gonna begin to sizzle and pop and fry, and that's what you're looking for. And if they're in these little fine mints like that, it's gonna get really caramelized and develop a ton of flavor. We're also looking to develop color on the bottom of the pan, like you see in these corners here. And if the meat's not where you want it, you can just pop in a little bit of butter. If you didn't know, butter will also deglaze a little bit of the pan. So it's both frying it and deglazing it to allow that meat more time to get the color we want. Now it's just bubbling and sizzling and frying and getting beautifully browned. And once that meat is nice and browned and the bottom of the pan is developing that color, we can go ahead and add in our pureed vegetables. And we want to season those vegetables with salt. And there's moisture in those vegetables, and that moisture is going to pick up all that brown bit off the bottom of the pan. And we're going to go ahead and like almost reduce that moisture down and concentrate that flavor. And right now, when that vegetable and meat mixture is mixed together, that should just look delicious in and of itself. How it looks now is a sign of how it will look eventually. And to me, that looks delicious. So we just want to cook the vegetables and the meat down until we redevelop some color on the bottom of the pan and all that moisture is evaporated. We got a minute left of that 30 minutes. That shows how much time you need to take to show this love. Once all that moisture is evaporated, the bottom of the pan is nice and caramelized. We're gonna go ahead and deglaze with 2 to 3 cups of white wine, and then we're gonna now allow that to reduce down and thicken. Scrape up all those bits off the bottom of the pan, clean it up. Then we can go ahead and add in a bay leaf or two and a little bundle of 1 sprig of rosemary and maybe 2 or 3 sprigs of thyme. Now, once that wine has reduced and the mixture's tightened up, Then we can go ahead and add in some water, or in this case, I'm gonna use some beef stock. About 2-3 cups will do. And once that's stirred in, we can go ahead and add about a cup of milk. Whole milk in this case is fine. Stir that in, and we're gonna bring this up to a boil, drop it down to a simmer. Once it's simmering, we're gonna put a lid on, just cracked open to allow a little evaporation, and then we're gonna let this cook for 2 hours. Now to go with our white ragu, we're gonna make a little pappardelle, something we don't think we've ever done on the show. But just like all pasta, it starts with Italian 00 fine ground flour, 450 grams, and about 254 grams of egg, which I find to be 5 eggs. I don't need to measure anymore. I just throw them in. We can always adjust with some more flour later if it's too much. And then the flour goes in. And of course, I think you should learn how to do this by hand and practice doing so as often as possible. I got a little wrist thing, and if you got a little pain or you're not strong enough or for any reason cannot do this by hand using a food processor, it's gonna work beautifully. And it's gonna happen basically instantaneously. Now we can just sort of work it. Try and pick up all these crumbs off the board. Get a feel for where the hydration level is. If you're a grandma, you can do it the grandma way, using 2 hands, sort of rolling a log out and taking the ends, folding them in, and repeating, just sort of rolling a little log. Or do it like a ball, constantly rotating, folding the dough and some air onto itself until it sort of comes together. Now right now it's nicely hydrated. What I'm just trying to do is smooth out the top. So I'm just creating tension on the surface before I let it rest. All this dry bits, I want to scrape off. And I just gently work it into a nice smooth ball. I can tell it's nicely hydrated because it's not hard to work with. My arm isn't killing me. My wrist's not killing me. It's supple, but it's got some durability. It's also sealing pretty well on the bottom, which if it's not, that's a surefire sign it's a bit dry. That's a good looking first stage of the ball. And I always say there's 2 ways to develop gluten in dough. Thought there was only one way, which was kneading it, but thanks to Evan Funky, a great pasta maker in America, you also develop gluten by resting. So by wrapping it up into a ball, some plastic, creating a little moist environment for it, letting it rest at room temperature. We're gonna let that rest for about 30 minutes before we knead it for another 3 minutes or so. Really smooth out the surface. And then we let it rest a little bit longer before we're ready to make our pappardelle. So now it's just been chilling out. Should be more hydrated, a lot more easier to work with. But let's see, maybe sometimes it's not. Yeah, it's nice and soft. Now we can just give it a final knead, a little bit gentler, trying to smooth out that surface. Just kind of pushing forward, rocking, and then turning. Just do this maybe 3 minutes. It's a lot smoother, it's bouncy. This is ready to go. Now I'm gonna wrap it. We're just gonna let that rest for, I don't know, another hour and a half until the sauce is ready. Give that time to hydrate a little bit further. And I usually make the dough ahead of time or tell you to make it tomorrow. But this is an example of how you can make it kind of quickly. Got the sauce on the stove, got this ready. By the time the sauce is done, we're cutting pasta. So it's been 2 hours. Our sauce is now complete. We'll deal with it in a little bit, but now we're gonna deal with our pappardelle. And the dough is nice and relaxed, beautiful. And I'm gonna take about 1/3 of this, wrap the rest back up. First, what I wanna do, just flatten it out. Now we're gonna roll this through the pasta machine. We're gonna start at 0, the widest setting, roll the pasta through, switch the setting to 1, roll the pasta through, and increase that setting till we get all the way to the thinnest setting. On my machine, that would be the 9th setting. I just want to trim the edge. And what I'm gonna do is just measure 12-inch strips like that, so we'll cut the pappardelle out of that 12 inches. So now we're gonna allow these to kind of just chill. It's what we call curing the dough. This semi-dries it out. It's still gonna be a fresh dough, but just kind of gives it that little texture, that little extra chew that we like in a fresh pasta. I'm gonna let it dry out 5-10 minutes. Then I'm gonna go give it a flip, dry out the other side. And then once they're pretty stiff, then we can go ahead and cut them. To be honest, I got caught up in a call and it's probably on the border of too dry. You just roll it all the way up. I would start working with it before those edges start curling up. That edge you can see is just a little too dry. It's a little frail, but it's still gonna work no problem. I'm just gonna cut about the length of my thumbnail into strips of pappardelle. Unravel them, and there you've got some beautiful pappardelle. Albeit mine's a little dry, but don't worry, once we drop them into the water, it's gonna come back to life. Go through and prepare the rest of the pappardelle, toss it in a little flour, even though it doesn't really need it. It's more for the pasta water, to be honest. And we're ready to go. Now, always make sure while that ragu's cooking, you give it a stir while it's going. Make sure nothing's sticking on the bottom. And after 2 hours, we're ready to give it a check. It's thickened, it's nice and reduced, it's concentrated. It's a beautiful thing. We're gonna remove those herbs and the bay leaf. And now this is kind of gonna act like the base. We're gonna finish the sauce, make it come together when we marry it with the pasta. So I'm just gonna move that sauce on the back burner. I'm gonna get my saucier on the front burner and season some boiling water for the pasta. I'm gonna get a spoonful of the Ragu Bianco into the saucier. Then I'm gonna drop in my pasta. And since I just made it, this pasta is only gonna take about a minute to cook, maybe less. And you can always take a bite to check its doneness, and once it's ready to go, we're just gonna fish it out with a spider and drag it into the sauce, adding a decent amount of pasta water to this one. We're gonna turn that sauce slightly creamy, let it coat the pappardelle, and finish cooking, soaking up all that flavor. Should only take about a minute or so. And once that sauce is beginning to cling to the pasta and that pasta looks done, I'm gonna add a little bit more pasta water. I'm gonna kill the heat, and I'm gonna toss in a knob of butter. Just sort of add a little bit more creaminess to the sauce, cool it down a little bit, and then I'm gonna finish it with some Parmigiano Reggiano. Gently work that in, melt that into the sauce, and that's kind of that final flavor that's required in a Ragu Bianco like this. This is real old school shit. And we're ready to plate it. We're gonna take a bowl, and something like a pappardelle, I like to kind of pull upwards, let it dangle, and then gently lower it onto the plate while I'm spinning the plate to create a little nest that gives height to a dish like this. So once you got a nice mound, then I'm gonna go in with the sauce. If it's a little thick, I might add a little bit of pasta water to it, and then I'm just gonna spoon it on top. Nice little pockets of that sauce, that meat, the pasta. Then you finish with some Parmigiano Reggiano. And there you have it, the original Ragu. The Ragu that's tragically undercooked, and one I plead for you to add to your rotation. I mean, it tastes like Bolognese. It's just almost like a more pure form of it. Remove the tomato and you get more of the essence of the meat. You get the cheese more. You kind of pick up everything a little bit better. Without this pasta, you don't get the Bolognese you most likely know and love. So we're gonna give a little respect today to Ragu Bianco. Recipe's gonna be down in the description. That's all that I have today. I'll see you next time. Until then, take care of yourself and go feed yourself.